welcome you as well. And so we're so excited that you can join us. Before the session begins, we do like to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So just a few things. One, we know that this is a safe and supportive space. So if ever at times you feel a little bit uncomfortable, we have an awesome comfort room suite down there. And for those of you who are on the chat, if you need to step away and take a little break to take care of yourself, it is okay. You can come back and rejoin us at any time. Also, if you are in this room, don't use your Hoover app. You can use it to take the survey at the end, but it will cause a little bit of confusion if you do use it while during the session in person. Those of you who are on the app, continue to use it, and I hope you have a great experience. Let's see, we have a few other things, but then we're gonna kind of go ahead. Again, if you need CEUs, please sign in, and our attendant right there has the attendance sheet online. Make sure that you guys are signing in and filling out your survey. That lets us know that you are here and in attendance. So please welcome and join me in just the presenter for this particular session, Ms. Jacqueline Boutros.
Thank you. Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jacqueline Boutros. I am the program manager for Integral Care's Mobile Crisis Outreach Team. We are a team that respond to folks experiencing crisis in the community. And we also we were funded last year for a new program within MCOT, Intensive Child and Family Services, which is what I'll be focusing on today. I also have my manager here with me, so I'm going to hand her the mic to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marissa Aguilar Malik. I'm the practice administrator of crisis services at Integral Care. So I oversee the mobile crisis outreach teams, our integration into the 911 call center, and our urgent walk-in clinic PES. So I'm here to answer any crisis services across the continuum with Integral Care if those questions do come up following Jacqueline's presentation.
All right, so I will dive right in. So as mentioned, the mobile crisis outreach team historically has responded to folks experiencing crisis in the community. We're a mobile team. The clinicians ride out in pairs, and we are responding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Recently, we were funded for this program, the Intensive Child and Family Services program for MCOT, because the community identified a gap in service provision for a really specific population. The population that we're looking to serve is children and families experiencing crisis who are repeatedly presenting to crisis services. So presenting to emergency departments, here in Austin, to Dell Children's Emergency Department, to inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations, or calling 911. What we've been seeing is that these children and families will reach out to those crisis services, receive the treatment there, discharge to the community, and then pop back up in crisis. So what that indicates is that those children and family are not being served at the level of care that they need. So this program was funded in order to fill that gap. What the program aims to do is to be a bridge program to connect these children and families to the level of care that they need and to offer wraparound intensive support until they're receiving the care at that level. This was identified here in Travis County, but it is also an issue that's been identified as happening nationwide. There was recently a New York Times article citing a JAMA study that had come out. It just came out in December of this year. And it had a couple of really important points that really spoke to the purpose of our program. So I thought I'd start by referencing those. The article was titled, the JAMA Pediatrics article was titled, Mental Health Revisits at U.S. Pediatric Emergency Departments. And it suggests that pediatric mental health ED visits and revisits are increasing, and identifying patients at high risk of revisit provides an opportunity for tailored interventions to improve mental health care delivery. The study found that overall visits to pediatric emergency rooms for mental health crises increased 43% from 2015 to 2020, rising by 8% per year on average, with an increase in emergency visits for every category of mental illness. By comparison, ER visits for all medical causes rose by 1.5% annually. So you can really see the difference there. Compared with patients presenting with suicidal or self-harming behavior, those with psychotic disorders were 42% more likely to revisit the emergency department within 6 months, the study found. Patients with impulse control disorders were 36% more likely, and patients with disorders like autism and ADHD were 22% more likely. Patients who required medications to subdue them were 22% more likely to revisit than patients who did not. The drugs were used more often on Black patients, so these drugs to subdue the clients presenting, used more often on Black patients as well as on male patients between the ages of 18 and 21. Dr. Foster, who was referenced in the study, described those disparities as concerning and motivation for thinking about how to enhance equitable care. So a lot of these numbers really speak to the purpose of our program and reflect a lot of what we've seen anecdotally, not only since this program was funded, but with MCOT at large. A lot of the clients that we see do experience, especially the children clients, do experience disorders like autism and ADHD. And there's really a gap in service provision for those clients, especially when they're popping into crisis frequently. So MCOT for Child and Family Services was developed to add additional capacity to serve children and their families in our community. The program focuses on expanding school, home, and community-based intervention services to prevent unnecessary inpatient hospitalization, provide continuity of care and crisis support following an initial crisis response, especially for those families not previously connected to behavioral health supports, and to act as hospital liaisons to Dell Children's Emergency Department to coordinate with their personnel on determining an appropriate level of care, which can include private psychiatric hospital admission, placement to a state mental health facility, and discharge to the community with appropriate supports. MCOT as a whole, the program has always strived to provide the right care at the right place and at the right time, while offering treatment in the least restrictive environment. The goal of intensive MCOT services for children and families is to work collaboratively with the client and their family to help stabilize the crisis and bridge the client and family to ongoing support services in the community or within our agency. This program really identifies with Integral Care's policy as a whole to serve in the least restrictive environment. Research has proven that people do better if and when they're able to be served in the community safely. So our goal when we go out, when we're dispatched out to children and family, is always to assess and try, if we can, to keep them in the community where their supports are and serve them there. If needed, we do coordinate with hospitalizations in order to keep the child safe. The program eligibility for our CFS program is fairly broad. Individuals needing a crisis response from Integral Care MCOT must reside in Austin, Travis County. Otherwise, they would be transferred by our helpline personnel to the local mental health authority in their catchment area for continuity of care. The individuals must be between ages 1 and 17 to be eligible, and they must be believed to be experiencing a mental health crisis. So what this looks like right now for us receiving referrals is MCOT has always received referrals from the Integral Care Helpline. That's 512-472-HELP. And our team is dispatched out to folks experiencing crisis by the hotline personnel. So with this new program, we're going out in the same crisis response way. We get the call, we get a dispatch from the hotline identifying that there's a children and family in crisis, and we'll respond to that child and family in crisis. If the clinicians see that, yes, this child meets this broad criteria, but also they're seeing some gaps in the service that the child is receiving or the child and family is receiving, then they would be referred to our intensive child family services program. Some of the gaps that they might identify is, oh, this child is not connected to any medication management, any case management, not connected to integral care services or an outside provider or therapy, and has presented 2 or 3 times to the hospital or in crisis in the last few months. So that would indicate, right, this child and family does not have the level of services they need. Why don't we open them up for a longer period of time than our typical crisis response and get them connected to the care they need? Our typical crisis response, we serve people in a 7-day window. So we get in, resolve the crisis, get out. With this program, we're looking to open the child and family up to a 90-day service package to ensure that all of their needs are met and to give us the time needed to offer support and connect them to the services that they need. During that bridge period, we would provide the intensive wraparound services that they need. And because this program is really client-centered, there is no cookie cutter provision of services. So we offer support to the parents in the way of psychoeducation, living skills training, safety planning for their child, case management, connection to resources and community resources. For the child, we offer support in the way of living skills training, coping skills, safety planning, de-escalation, and with the goal of trying to prevent the family from having to utilize crisis services again. So I just mentioned a few of these: crisis assessment and intervention, safety planning, family support services, site-based psychiatric screening and psychiatric crisis assessment, up to 90 days of crisis relapse prevention services, crisis counseling, case management, medication management. Our team also has an APRN who can prescribe. So oftentimes one of the things that we see is when we go out and see clients in the community, if they're not connected or haven't been connected in a long time, it can take some weeks, sometimes over a month, to reestablish connection to a clinic and then to be seen by their medical provider. If we run into that and that's the case, we can have our provider go out and prescribe medication until we're able to get that client connected to ongoing care. Psychosocial rehabilitation, rehabilitative skills training, and then the linkage to ongoing behavioral health care at the appropriate level of care. We may also run into, so when it says appropriate level of care, we may also run into children that do indeed have services, but if they're still representing in crisis frequently or experiencing suicidal ideation frequency, making attempts, engaging in self-harm, having behavioral outbursts, it indicates that they're really not being served at the level of care that they need. And oftentimes that's just limitation of resources in the community, time. A lot of the programs that have really intensive wraparound services have a long wait list, and the child may be on that wait list but not receiving those services yet. These are also opportunities where we would step in and serve the child at that capacity until they're receiving the level of care that they need. So we'll often see children that are connected to integral care's lowest level of care, which is like a level of care 1. And they receive case management and medication management, but just aren't seen frequently enough to prevent these crises from happening. We would say, you know what, this is a good opportunity to step in for this family and advocate for a higher level of care, get them connected to a program or additional services, whether that's therapeutic services or group services, so that they're being seen more frequently and receiving the level of care that they need to prevent ongoing crisis. I mentioned that our referrals primarily come through our Integral Care's helpline. We also can receive internal referrals within Integral Care. So if teams identify or run into somebody that they think would benefit from this program, they can go ahead and make the referral to us. And then finally, we also collaborate with Dell Children's. So if Dell Children's is noticing, hey, we've seen this family several times in the last 5 or 6 months, they can reach out, refer to us so that we can get that child opened to the services that they need. Program delivery. The program as it stands, we have 1 licensed team lead staff, 4 QMHPs. Those are unlicensed clinicians within Integral Care, and then 1 parent partner. The parent partner position is a really exciting position for this unit. This is an individual who has lived experience and is really there specifically to support the parents. As we know, oftentimes when a child is going into crisis, it involves the whole family, and sometimes those needs aren't met. So the parent partner's role is to step in and offer an array of services. She can offer emotional support in the moment of the crisis, advocacy. She can be a liaison between different community organizations, provide resources for the parent, help with case management tasks, and really just be there to support the parent who oftentimes has residual crises from what their child is going through. Program performance. Thus far, our program has served 255 unduplicated children and adolescents in fiscal year 2022. So this was the first full year of the program being active. 59% of those children and adolescents were the ones that we've served were connected to ongoing care. 97% of the children and adolescents served did not experience a crisis episode within 30 days of discharge from the program, which is really indicative, especially those last 2, of what we're aiming to do. We really want to get the children and families connected to the care that they need to then prevent these crisis episodes from happening. Demographics of children served. These might be really small for some of y'all in here. The races served, so I'll just kind of point them out so that y'all can see. This top bar is unknown, so that just means the data wasn't gathered at the time. 2 or more races, some other race, white, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, Black or African American, Asian, and then American Indian and Alaska Native. So primarily white, Black or African American, and then unknown. Ethnicities served, the blue represents Hispanic or Latino families. The orange represents non-Hispanic or Latino, and then the gray portion is also uncollected data, so unknown. Ages served, as mentioned, we can serve children aged 1 through 17. We're seeing a good range of those ages. So this represents ages 5 to 11. The middle value is ages 12 to 14. And then the last value is ages 15 to 17. Gender served, blue is female, orange is male, and then the gray slice there is additional gender identities. And then income status served. The top the top number here is unknown. And this next one is under 200% of the average household income, 151% to 200%, 101% to 150%, 50 to 100%, and then 50% of FPIG. So very diverse in regards to the income status served. I have a case example of a recent family served. MCOT responded to a 15-year-old transgender client after suicidal ideation was reported at school. The child and family were opened to intensive MCOT and provided with crisis intervention, safety planning, coping skills training, mediation between guardian and child, reconnection to medication services, and parent support from MCOT's family partner. The client ultimately restarted medication, got a new job, began dating, became involved in their school, and reformed a stronger connection with their guardian. And I included a quote here from our family partner who was really significant in the serving of this family. And she noted, "My overall takeaway from working with this family is that we must recognize the trauma parents experience. The guardian knew something wasn't right. Even with all of her resources, something was missing. She was exhausted, but still had the determination to keep her child safe. The guardian doing so caused the client to have some resentment towards her. But I was there to help bring up those unwanted conversations. I was there to give mom that space to talk about what she wanted and needed for her family. I was there to encourage mom to talk about what she went through with her child's suicide attempt. I was there to see mom no longer living in that place of fear." And that's from Ana Gonzalez, MCOT's family partner. This was a great case example of what we're aiming to do, because it was providing those intensive wraparound services, a wide array of different services for the child and family in order to ensure that their needs were met and they were connected to the services that they needed. And that just blew right through the presentation piece, y'all. But I do anticipate, I know we've had some questions come in from the folks participating online. So we can start with those and then, or we can start with who's in the room. Does anybody in the room have any questions? Yes.
I was listening to the ear for
Thank you.
with MCOT, and I know the referral will come through this also. So, you know, it seems to me that that's an option. Some say, you know, they're sitting there with someone who needs help,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not professional. What they say, you know, that makes it all in what are your thoughts? What is the process for situations like that?
So anyone can reach out to our mobile crisis outreach team via the hotline, Integral Care's helpline. And it's so much of it is dependent on the situation and what's currently happening in that moment, because there is a line that tips the scale where emergency services are needed. Our goal with the mobile crisis outreach team, which would be initially responding to that crisis, is to prevent the use of emergency services. So to kind of get in before it reaches that point of imminent risk where emergency personnel is needed. So I would recommend having the 512-472 help number and using that and calling. It is trained staff that respond to those calls, and they'll go through their assessment and they determine whether or not MCOT gets dispatched. And then MCOT would dispatch in response to those phone calls. So for our typical crisis response, we have, based on the determination of the severity of the call, we have, if it's considered to be a routine dispatch, we have 24 hours. If it's considered to be urgent, we have 8 hours. And if it's considered to be emergent, we have 1. We don't, the helpline will give that information. We don't always take the full 8 hours. So I always recommend that folks ask for an ETA. If when you're on the phone with the hotline and they determine that MCOT is a good option for what's going on, you can say, hey, this is sort of time dependent. Can you provide an ETA? They are a separate program from MCOT, so they won't provide it because they won't know what's going on with the clinicians in the field, but they will note it in the dispatch so that the clinicians, upon receiving it, can then call and say, hey, we received the dispatch based on what's going on today and based on what kind of call this is. It looks like we'll be there in this amount of time. And that will kind of give you an idea of next steps. So if it is something that's then tipping into, we can't wait any longer, and we know that they told us they're going to be here in 4 hours, you could then make the determination to call for APD or emergency personnel. But if it was something that you could sit with the person and wait, or they were safe to wait as long as they knew that help was coming, then, oftentimes there's lots of benefits to having the mental health clinicians respond rather than police or EMS to get those folks what they need. Yeah, yes.
I have a few questions, but I'm gonna piggyback off of where I am, there's been a few times that we've called MCOT,
Mm-hmm.
and that turnaround time, just like you said, is a little shaky.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, the dispatch, they are pretty much saying, we don't know. But where the confusion comes in, especially when we are supporting our peers,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know a time, and we don't receive that phone call from anyone. To say that, yes, it'll be an hour, or
Mm-hmm.
it'll be 8 hours, so that we can prepare our peer for the next step.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see if there is, just like you said, so I'm very thankful you said, and we get PTA. And we will definitely do that part, but I'm wondering how quickly do you guys get that dispatch so that you can see that I called 7 times already with no response.
So I'm gonna break that down. That's okay. That's okay. So make sure that you are requesting the ETA, because it's definitely not automatic. Automatically, what happens is MCOT receives the dispatch with the information of the response, and then it gets added to their list or their assignment list for the day. For perspective, what happens with the clinicians when they come in in the morning, they'll have an assignment list either of follow-ups or of routine dispatches from the day before, or dispatches that have come in overnight. And they create their day based on that. And then they ride out. And as new dispatches come in, they triage those dispatches and respond accordingly. So the time is very dependent, because with the crisis response, they could show up and somebody might not answer their door, and that takes 2 minutes. Or they could show up and it could be a really severe situation where they're with that person, perhaps waiting for assistance to get the person hospitalized, availability, and it could take hours. So always request the ETA, because they just get the dispatch and then kind of add it to their day as appropriate. When you request it, what should happen is that the hotline will then note it in their dispatch to us. When we receive the dispatches immediately. So they're received right after the call. There may be like 15 minutes delay in there, so that they can gather the information needed and get it to us. But you have the opportunity to get that ETA really quickly. So I would say just make sure that you're requesting it, and then you should be receiving a call back with that ETA. Unfortunately, for the second portion, in regards to like if you've called a number of times, it's unlikely that we'll get a dispatch for every single call. So what might happen is maybe the first few calls, we didn't get a dispatch. And then the fourth one we did, they decided, you know what, actually, this sounds like it needs a person's response right now. They dispatch us. And then the fifth and sixth, the dispatch doesn't come through, but they will send an email saying, hey, this person called back and requested ETA. So if you can remember and tell the folks that you work with, hey, that it is an option to ask right up front for that ETA so that the clinicians can call back. If you don't get a call back and you call the hotline back and ask for it, and they're not providing the information and you're kind of getting stuck in this uncomfortable back and forth, you can always request to speak to a supervisor as well. And the supervisors will typically communicate directly with me, and that will merit a faster response. So those are the two recommendations I would make to try to alleviate that, because it is a challenge to not know. It's really challenging to be sitting with somebody that's experiencing a crisis and not be able to tell them, hey, we're going to get this managed in an hour or in 4 hours or whatever. So yeah, I would say utilize those two tactics.
Thank you. Another question?
Sure.
Another question. If I am in the process, again, just like if it was a clergy or someone else that's working in the community and we are supporting, wherever we're supporting, and getting the resources that we need from, once the process happens, let's say that it is that 8 or 24 hours or whatever it may be, and we're not able to get in contact with that person. You know, I understand that, I get it. But is there anything that can be given? Like I said, I mean, we're still trying to get a call or whatever. So is there anything that we can get in saying that situation's been handled, or we did connect with John Henry, you know, whatever it may be, is there something there? Because at times, we're not only dealing with folks that are housed, but mostly for the unhoused population. Where we're really trying to get that.
So unfortunately, because of HIPAA, there's not much we can do other than confirm, hey, yes, we've received the dispatch. If you were the caller, we can't provide any details about the outcome unless the client signs an ROI, which the clinicians do have paper copies with them while they're riding out in the community. So I think that having that conversation, you know, either with the client, hey, make sure you tell them you want to be able to communicate with me, or you want me to be able to call and get some information on what happened here. And then they can tell the clinicians when they're there. Or if you note it when you call, hey, I'd like to request that somebody get an ROI, that they at least request an ROI from me. They can't force it, but if the client is open to having you as a person that we can provide information to, then that it would at least trigger the conversation so that they could say, hey, why, you know, are you interested in signing an ROI? This way we can provide information about what we did today. So I think that would be any other recommendation you have in that regard.
But we always try and gather it from community of care. So typically we are asking, especially if they're providers, that's helpful information. The challenges we also experience are these offers, but people don't respond. So I think just asking that that's a challenge too. Receive like family members, various reasons providers, of that nature. But we try and do education around life.
And the clinicians are also trained on offering like a limited ROI, because a lot of times clients don't have the clients that we engage with don't have the understanding of it seems like it's either like a yes or a no. So I've told the clinicians, always give them the option of doing a very limited ROI. You can just check that one box that has a blank and write in crisis disposition, and then you'll be able to call that person and tell them, hey, this is what went on today. And sometimes that makes the clients a little bit more comfortable in signing one. Any other questions?
I have a question. Oh, okay. So I noticed on the slide that there was a lot of the population we serve that they didn't identify. My question is why they didn't identify, either were they asked and they chose not to, or it was, if you're in a crisis and you need to ask the question. And then two, also when looking at the financial demographics, because you get percentages, I have no idea what that translates into as far as household income.
Ooh.
You may not know that. That's okay. That's okay.
I might have to circle back.
The local property line or the, I couldn't, so I was trying to figure out, like, I don't know what that, but,
I don't know where the,
okay.
I could go back to the slide, but I don't know what the actual number for the poverty line, the poverty income, right? I might have to Google it and come back to you. Felicia.
Well, I guess we know that it will, because typically that data goes along with race, goes along with a whole bunch of other things. And so when you start to consider that in the financial status, and then you start to the impact of hospitalization and all this other emergency stuff, it kind of has a trajectory of going up. So that's why I was asking.
Yes.
if you didn't know kind of those numbers. And if there were certain populations or certain areas where you were seeing, 'cause I know Travis County is big, right?
Mhm.
Think of it as the city, like the city of Austin, and but it's a wide range. So if there were specific locations where you're noticing more emergencies are coming or more impact.
Anecdotally, I would say no, there's not one area of the city that stands out. What I will say is that MCOT has a really good relationship with AISD. So a lot of our referrals, especially our initial referrals, come from the schools. So what will happen is the schools will do like a screener, the counselors will do like a suicide screener with a child. And if it scores a certain percentage, they'll call us to come out. They also call us anytime a child is indicating thoughts of self-harm, suicidal ideation. There's been an uptick in homicidal ideation, so threats to shoot up a school or come to school with a gun. They'll call us for that. And any child that's demonstrating behavioral concerns at school that maybe are aggression, things like that. And even that is like really widely dispersed. There are some schools that get really comfortable with using us, so they use us more frequently. They begin to call us out more frequently. But in regards to a pattern of, hey, there's this specific area of Austin that we get dispatched to, it's kind of all over the map. Yeah, I would say all areas. Did I answer all of your questions, Felicia? Oh, the unknown piece. Hard to say, a little bit of both. My honest answer is that I think probably what happens is it doesn't get, the initial call comes into the hotline and they create a chart and they may not add it because in the time of the phone call, when the person is in crisis and things are escalated, they're not asking those specific questions. And then it's not like a part that has to be done to move forward in the chart. So then it doesn't get updated on the back end. We really would like to be gathering that data, especially for this program. It's a large number. And we run into that with the financials as well. So kind of looking at that, the income of the families and whether or not they're insured. And it is that a lot of that is the experience of the crisis. So the clinicians are trained to ask for it and enter it. And it's kind of just really continuing to push that message, because in the moment when they're responding, I think it doesn't feel as pertinent as the crisis response. And then it ends up with that large gap. I think that that's the case more often than the client refusing to provide the information. Yes. Yeah, I think that absolutely could be edited in during the follow-ups. Any other questions in the room? And then I can move on to the Zoom questions. Oh, we've got them here. All right.
All right, the first
in the community. So all of the services that the intensive CFS MCOT team is offering is in the community. We have an office that we office out of, but the clinicians are in the field, in the community, providing mobile services all day. And that will also be the situation with intensive CFS MCOT. So it's usually going to be in the home as long as that's what the family is comfortable with.
Program hours.
Yes. MCOT's, the crisis response hours, we are responding. So we have staff scheduled 7 days a week, Monday through Friday, it's 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then weekends and holidays, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. We are available to respond overnight if dispatched by the hotline and needed to meet the 8-hour or 1-hour response time. So we have an on-call rotation for clinicians providing overnight services as needed by the community. The MCOT, the CFS MCOT team is a little bit different than the crisis response team because usually families that are being served in a repeated fashion don't want services at like 10 p.m. So we do those hours from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. And that's just Monday through Friday. There is an on-call rotation for the CFS team for the weekends and the holidays. They don't need to be in office, but there's an on-call rotation in the event that a family on that caseload goes into crisis or needs them on the weekends or holiday. But otherwise they do those 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. because we like to be able to catch the families after school as well so that we can offer support to everybody at the same time.
When MCOT transports these adult children, are they required to go specifically to the emergency department or can they go directly to the psychiatric?
So this is another situation that's really dependent on what's currently going on. We don't have like an automatic direct admit program with Dell Children's, but the clinicians do call first, just as they do with adults. So our large preference is to do direct admit to a psychiatric unit if we're able to do so. And that's across the board for children and adults. When you're experiencing a mental health crisis, sitting in an emergency department is incredibly challenging, and we'd like to avoid it at all costs. So the clinicians do reach out to Dell Children's to try to connect first and say, we've done the assessment in the community. We believe this person needs hospitalization. Do you have availability? But where it goes from there is very dependent on whether or not there's availability. So whether there's a bed available at Dell's, whether or not they're okay with that process and they say, yes, you can bring them right in, or no, we'd prefer that they go through the ED, and what the family's preferences are. Location comes into play, past experiences come into play. So if the family has a preference to go to a different local hospital, then we will try to advocate for that as well.
A response to my question. I agree with your response of too many children end up in emergency departments or psychiatric hospitals, but non-hospital care would be more effective. It's very sad that many families have to jump through hoops trying to get adequate care. What can we do as a community to help create non-hospital care that our youth need? And how can that help?
What can we do as a community to
Help create the non-hospital care that our youth need?
So, let me think on that one. Feels like a very macro issue for me to respond to right now, but I will try. So I think that I think programs like this were based on the community identifying this need, right? So I think communities coming together to have those discussions and to pool funding for more programs like this. As I noted earlier, this was identified in Travis County as a gap in services. And so this program was funded to serve that gap. However, as we saw with the New York Times article, this is an issue that's presenting nationwide. So it's going to be really community specific where folks, I think, you know, those of us here today, paying attention today, working in this field, receiving services in this field, I think coming together and really advocating for more programs that serve at this intensive level and pointing to the data that shows that it's needed. And then I think continuing to track the results and the demographics of the clients served and the outcome of those clients served, that's really where the more permanent programs then start to get developed, right? So we continue to serve this population and we show the data that, hey, yeah, once MCOT CFS stepped in and served this family and got them connected to this program, they didn't present back into crisis for another 7 months. They didn't utilize an emergency department. They didn't utilize 911 because their needs were met. And the more that we can prove the, you know, worthiness of these programs and the need for these programs with that data, I think then that's when you start to see the ball get rolling a little bit more programs like this being developed, more programs like this being funded and continued in an ongoing capacity. Was there a second part of that question that I skipped over? Oh, what can? So I think that our responsibility here, in addition, our responsibility to the community, in addition to the families, is that piece where we're collecting the data, where we're, you know, speaking out, where we're coming to present at conferences like this to spread the word about the program so that it can be utilized, so that people can reach out for help when they need it. The more people we're able to serve, the more data we're able to provide to show, hey, this is something that works. I think that's what MCOT can do. And that's what our aim is to do, to continue to serve these families, get those needs met, and see these numbers, those really drastic numbers from the New York Times article, see those numbers go down, so that less families are presenting to the emergency department because they don't feel like they have any other option in those moments.
There's a few questions on MCOT response time. Can you talk about the difference between 24 hours, 8 hours, and 1 hour response? And then another question related to what would you suggest people do while they wait, especially around de-escalation?
Okay. So for the response times, to speak on the response times, that's not something that's determined by MCOT specifically. So it's hard for me to speak to that. What happens is when folks call the hotline goes through an assessment to determine what the most appropriate response is. They are looking at what's going on right now with that person, if it's something that can wait, if there are protective factors in place, like this person is really not doing well. However, they're with their family member who has said that they will safety plan and stay with them for the next 8 to 24 hours, versus, you know, one of the clients that we were talking about earlier, just homeless, alone in the community, that puts that person at significantly higher risk. You know, they don't have those supports in place. They're looking at the risk factors. They're looking at substance use, access to means, a plan, the safety of the community. So they're taking a bunch of different things into account when they're making that determination. And then we get dispatched and we just respond as such.
Yeah, and I would say, just for individuals, my recommendation is to provide as much information as possible. The more information we have on especially risk factors, the more likely the intensity type will raise. And we all know crisis situations are very dynamic. And so if things change, 30 minutes after you do the initial hotline call, please call back. Because those intensity spikes don't necessarily stick to what they are at the initial dispatch. If something happens and there's escalation that is happening prior to our response at a location, we want to know what that is so we can help support and or triage our calls that we're working on to get a more fast response out to the location to help de-escalate as well. And then the other question was, what do you recommend for de-escalation and safety while waiting?
That's also a really challenging question to respond to without knowing what the situation is specifically. I would recommend, if anybody hasn't taken any courses like mental health first aid, I would say take that. So especially if you're somebody that we've heard of a couple of times is here in this room, like I'm with people all the time out in the community, and these are things that happen. I would say educating yourself on mental health first aid and de-escalation skills is really helpful. The quick and dirty version of it that I to provide some information right now, as somebody that's worked in crisis for a long while, I think that holding space for that person, allowing that person to talk, to express what's going on, giving them space to process it, oftentimes moving, getting somebody walking, that's a tactic that I've utilized quite a bit in the past. Let's get outside, let's do some circles around the parking lot and continue to support them and talk with them while they're doing that. I think that you also have to keep your own safety and the safety of others in mind. So if somebody's not de-escalating, or if things seem to be heading in a worse direction, like Marissa said, call back and provide an update. Hey, this is what's going on. As previously mentioned, oftentimes there's a lot of benefit to having a mental health clinician respond rather than a police department or Travis County Sheriff's Office. The folks may have experienced a traumatic experience before with police. They might just have a bad kind of conception of how the police might respond. It might trigger them worse. So if you can call back and say, hey, things are getting worse, and like Marissa said, provide as much detail as possible. Here are the things that are happening. Here are the things I'm concerned about. How soon is MCOT going to be here? How quickly can they get here? Do that so that, again, ideally a team can get there quickly, but keeping your own safety in mind as well. If things are escalating, somebody's getting aggressive, APD does have mental health officers, and I would recommend calling and saying, hey, we need an MHO, a mental health officer, to respond. I'm with somebody that's having a mental health crisis, and we need somebody here pretty soon.
How can families meet with MCOT to assess for the intensive wraparound program? Is this done in the home or at PDS?
So I would say initially our referrals come through the hotline. So if somebody's having a crisis, we would respond to that crisis response, and we would then be able to open that person up to the intensive CFS services. You could also call the hotline and ask about it. Say, we're not connected to services. This is what this is what's going on. Again, this program is serving a really niche population. So it's those families that are having crises happen. So presenting to hospitalizations, calling 911. If you find that you're a family that's experiencing that, call the hotline whenever you're looking to hospitalize your child or when one of those crises are happening. We can engage at that moment, provide the crisis response, and then open that person up to our bridge program. If it's before that's happening, if you're just needing services or intensive services, I would say call the helpline inquiring about integral care programs. You could just skip over the bridge part and go directly into a like a level of care 3 or a level of care 1, receiving medication management or case management for your child, or for the child and family. Additionally, if you're needing resources, the hotline is a really good resource to call to say, this is what's going on with us. What resources do you have to offer us? As mentioned, the intake would happen at home. So we don't bring anybody in office. For MCOT, we would come to the home to provide those services so long as the family was comfortable with it.
Does the child need to be in crisis at the time of the referral?
Yes. At the time of the referral, as it stands right now, that's how it happens kind of naturally, because our referrals are coming through the helpline and MCOT's initial crisis response. I would again encourage anybody that's experiencing their child having mental health or behavioral issues happen to try to get connected with ongoing care right from the get-go. Don't wait for the crisis. If you're seeing signs of, you know what, I think my child really needs some additional support, I think I really need some additional support, call the hotline about getting the information. Our CFS clinic, our Child and Family Services clinic, does walk-in intakes. I want to say it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 2 right now. And they don't schedule them, but you could call to confirm that those are the walk-in hours, and then you can just show up and complete an intake and ideally prevent the crisis from happening. But as it stands right now, we step in, when that crisis response is needed.
Can MCOT's APRN help connect families to an ND to order genetic medication testing?
Ooh,
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that's
And I'm not sure that we've had those come up before, so you can find out.
report back. That's what I think we encourage lab work, best practice, a really thorough assessment. So I think always, and as is my motto in life, ask, always ask for it. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. But if that's something that you're really interested in and you feel would benefit your child services or would really help target what your child needs, ask about that. Because even if the APRN could not do it, working with the team, we could connect you with who could do it.
Are the times stated interval care specific, or is that any LMHA?
My understanding is it's any LMHA, at least here in Texas.
Yes, and I'm not sure if they're referring to hours of availability or the response times. However, those are standard across the state of Texas. So MCOTs need to be available 24/7. And those are contract guidelines through the state of Texas for the response times. MCOTs are very different, urban versus rural, so they might not be in office Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Saturdays and Sundays, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. They might have more reduced hours or on call, but they all should be running 24/7 operations. And I believe the last question that we have is, can you provide your name and contact information?
Of course I can. Yes. And I can put it back up on the slide too, because my contact info. I don't know if it's on the slide. My name is Jacqueline Boutros, and I'm the program manager for the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team. And the best way to reach me would be email, and that would be firstname.lastname@integralcare.org. I do not think I have it on a slide, but next time I will.
I do have one more question, but I think just came in.
Okay.
Can we meet with you if your child is not currently in crisis but was recently seen in our children?
Oh,
I
that,
would say yes. I would say if there was a recent crisis, what we would call episode, and it's not currently occurring, but there was a recent episode and a lot of the issues that Jacqueline was mentioning that we could help support, it would be appropriate for a referral to the hotline, so that we could go out and prevent another future emergency happening.
and I would repeat what Marissa said earlier about providing as much information as possible. So if you call the hotline requesting that, I would just say provide as much information as possible about that crisis event. So about what happened when they went to Dell Children's, what was going on, what's still going on, what services you feel like you need. Provide as much information as possible and specifically request MCOT. And is that it? All right. Well, thank you all for your participation and questions. And I'm glad it ended up that we had just enough time for all the questions. Good thing I went so speedily through my presentation. Y'all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.